My name is Naomi, and I am 34 years old. Exactly one day after my emergency C-section, I was sitting in my hospital bed nursing my newborn daughter Zuri when my entire family broke into my private recovery room. My mother Beatrice threw a thick stack of legal documents onto my lap and demanded I sign away my late husband's $74 million trust fund. When I looked her in the eye and refused, she grabbed me by my hair and violently yanked me off the hospital bed. I hit the cold tile floor, feeling my fresh surgical incision tear open as my baby girl screamed in absolute terror. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally broken me, but they had no idea what was coming. By the next morning, their lives had turned into an absolute nightmare. Before I tell you how I systematically dismantled my toxic family's entire existence, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to fight back against the very people who were supposed to protect you. It was supposed to be a moment of peace. My husband Elijah had passed away 6 months earlier in a tragic car accident, leaving me pregnant, grieving, and entirely alone to navigate the immense wealth of his family estate in Atlanta. Elijah came from generations of successful Black entrepreneurs, and his legacy was something I swore to protect with my life. Zuri was the only piece of him I had left. I was exhausted recovering from a grueling delivery that had nearly claimed both of our lives, but holding her made the physical pain bearable. The hospital room was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of medical monitors and the gentle sound of my daughter breathing. Then the heavy wooden door of my VIP recovery suite slammed open, hitting the wall with a loud bang. Beatrice marched in wearing a pristine white church suit like she had just come from Sunday service. Right behind her was my younger sister Jada, carrying a designer handbag I knew she could not afford, and her husband Terrence, who immediately turned around and locked the door behind them. The loud click of that deadbolt echoed through the quiet room like a gunshot, sending a cold shiver down my spine. "What are you doing?" I asked, pulling Zuri closer to my chest. My maternal instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. Beatrice did not answer immediately. She walked straight to the side of my bed, her heels clicking aggressively against the floor, and slammed a thick manila folder onto my lap. The papers spilled out over my blanket. I recognized the letterhead immediately. It was from a sketchy law firm, not the prestigious legal team that managed Elijah's estate. "You need to sign these right now." My mother commanded, her voice dropping to that cold, authoritative tone she used whenever she wanted total obedience. I looked down at the documents. They were transfer of power forms legally surrendering my absolute control of Elijah's $74 million trust fund over to Beatrice and Terrence. I stared at her in complete disbelief. "You are out of your mind," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of shock and anger. "I am not signing anything." Jada rolled her eyes, crossing her arms over her chest as she looked down at me. "Stop being difficult, Naomi," she whined. "You are clearly traumatized from the birth and from losing Elijah. You are too unstable to manage that kind of money right now. Terrence knows how to handle investments. Mom is just trying to protect the family wealth. Protect the family wealth." The sheer audacity of that statement made my blood boil. It was not their wealth. My family had never contributed a single dime to Elijah's empire. I looked at Terrence, who was leaning against the locked door with a smug expression on his face. Terrence had never held down a real job in his life. He drove luxury cars and wore expensive watches while constantly jumping from one shady business venture to another. The idea of handing over my late husband's legacy to a man who could barely pay his own phone bill was insulting. "Get out of my room," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and the intense physical pain radiating from my abdomen. "Get out before I call hospital security." Terrence stepped forward, uncrossing his arms. "Nobody is leaving until you sign those papers, Naomi," he said, stepping closer to the bed. "Do not make this harder than it has to be. We are doing this for your own good." I reached for the call button clipped to my bed rail, but before my fingers could even brush the plastic, Beatrice lunged forward. The mask of the respectable church deaconess completely fell away, revealing the monster I had known my entire life. She snatched the call button cord and ripped it entirely out of the wall socket. "You ungrateful, selfish girl," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "I gave you life. You owe me this. You owe this family." I pulled my baby tighter, trying to shield her from the hostility radiating from my mother. Beatrice then did the unthinkable. She grabbed a fistful of my hair. I screamed as she yanked my head backward with brutal force. The sudden violent movement threw my entire body off balance. I tried to brace myself, but I was incredibly weak from the major abdominal surgery I had endured just 24 hours prior. She pulled again, harder this time, dragging me right off the edge of the hospital bed. I hit the cold, hard tile floor with a sickening thud. A blinding, searing agony ripped through my lower abdomen. My fresh C-section incision felt like it was tearing wide open, pouring fresh fire into my veins. Zuri tumbled from my arms onto the soft blankets I had dragged down with me, and she immediately began to wail a piercing, terrified scream that echoed off the sterile hospital walls. I curled into a ball on the floor, gasping for air, the pain radiating through every single nerve in my body. Jada just stood there, watching, not even flinching, as I lay helpless on the floor. "Sign the papers," Beatrice yelled, standing over me like a ruthless dictator. "Sign the papers right now and this will all stop." My vision was swimming with dark spots and the pain was making it hard to breathe, but my survival instincts kicked in. My hand frantically patted the side of the metal bed frame, feeling blindly for the emergency code blue button hidden on the baseboard near the floor. It was a feature the nurses had pointed out to me when I checked into the VIP suite, just in case I fell and could not reach the primary call cord. My fingers finally found the red plastic circle. I pressed it with every single ounce of strength I had left in my exhausted body. Instantly, loud alarms began blaring in the hallway outside my room. Bright red emergency lights flashed above the door, reflecting off the walls. I could hear heavy footsteps thundering down the corridor, heading straight for my room. I looked up at my mother, expecting to see panic in her eyes, expecting them to scramble for the exit and run away from the consequences of what they had just done. Instead, Terrence quickly unlocked the door and stepped back against the wall. Beatrice fell to her knees right beside me. She grabbed my shoulders and began wailing loud theatrical sobs that completely drowned out my baby's cries. "Oh my God, please help my daughter!" Beatrice screamed at the top of her lungs, her face contorted in perfect fake agony. "Somebody help her, she is trying to hurt the baby, she has completely lost her mind." The hospital door burst open with a loud crash. A team of medical staff and hospital security guards flooded into the room, taking in the chaotic scene. I lay there in agonizing pain, clutching my bleeding abdomen, watching my mother put on the performance of a lifetime. She stroked my hair with fake tenderness while crying tears that looked entirely real to the nurses rushing to my side. I tried to speak to tell them that I had been assaulted by my own family, but the pain medications and the sheer shock of the fall made my words slur together into an incoherent mumble. The doctors looked from my frantic mother to my crying baby, and then down at me lying on the floor. I realized with sheer absolute horror that this assault was not just an impulsive act of violence. It was a perfectly calculated setup designed to make me look like an unfit, unstable mother. They were going to use my trauma against me to steal everything I had left. The doctors and security guards rushed past the broken door frame, their boots squeaking against the linoleum. The room was total chaos. My heart pounded as strong hands grabbed my shoulders to assess my injuries. Before I could explain what my family had done, Beatrice escalated her performance to a masterclass in manipulation. She threw herself over my legs, weeping with theatrical devastation. "Oh, merciful Lord, please help my baby girl," Beatrice wailed, clutching her pristine church suit. "She just snapped, doctor." We came to congratulate her and she was holding little Zuri over the window ledge. She threw herself on the floor when we tried to take the baby. The lie was so horrific my brain could not process the words. I stared at the woman who gave birth to me, unable to comprehend the absolute evil pouring out. "No," I gasped, struggling against the intense burning pain. "That is a lie." She pushed me. She pulled my hair. I tried to point at the tuft of braids still caught in her manicured fingers, but my arms felt like lead. Jada stood by the door, clutching her fake Chanel bag, tears streaming down her flawless face. "It is true," Dr. Jida cried. "She has been talking out of her head since Elijah died. We are terrified for the baby. She is out of control." The attending physician, a stern-looking man, turned his gaze toward me. His eyes were devoid of warmth. He looked at me with cold, clinical suspicion. I could see the exact moment his perception shifted. Beatrice leaned in, grabbing the doctor's white coat. "Doctor, you have to protect my granddaughter," Beatrice pleaded. "Naomi has a history of extreme anger. I have been reading about this. It is postpartum psychosis, isn't it? She lost her mind from grief. She is a danger to herself and that innocent child." The term postpartum psychosis hung in the air. It was the ultimate weapon. A diagnosis that instantly stripped away my credibility and my rights as a mother. I thrashed against the nurses holding me down, ignoring the searing pain from my torn stitches. "Do not listen to them," I yelled, cracking with desperation. "Look at my head! Look at my hair! She attacked me because I would not sign away my husband's trust fund. Check the papers on the bed. They are trying to steal Elijah's money." But the harder I fought, the more chaotic I appeared. The nurses exchanged worried glances. The doctor scribbled furiously on his clipboard. In their eyes, I was not a terrified mother fighting for her child. I was exactly what Beatrice had painted me to be. A hysterical, grieving black woman having a violent psychotic break. My mother knew how to play the system, using every single stereotype against me to secure her $74 million payday. Lying on that cold tile floor, I realized this was the culmination of my entire existence in the Anderson family. Jada was the light-skinned, green-eyed, golden child who could do no wrong. She was the one my mother paraded around at church, whose mistakes were quietly swept under the rug. I was the dark-skinned daughter with natural hair and quiet demeanor. I was the workhorse expected to pay the bills, fix the problems, and endure emotional abuse in silence. Whenever I stood up for myself, I was immediately labeled as the angry, aggressive daughter who was jealous of her sister's beauty. Beatrice had spent 3 decades conditioning our community to view me as the difficult child. Now she was using that playbook on predominantly white medical professionals primed to believe the angry black woman narrative. I looked at Jada standing there looking delicate and traumatized. She had never worked a hard day coasting on her looks and our mother's endless enabling. She knew exactly what they were doing to me and did not care. She only cared about getting Elijah's money to fund her lavish fake lifestyle. Then Terrence stepped forward, placing an arm around Jada's shoulders. "Sir, what exactly did you witness here?" the doctor asked, his pen hovering over the medical chart. Terrence looked at me with dead, empty eyes before turning to the doctor with deep, fake concern. "It breaks my heart, but my mother-in-law is telling the absolute truth," Terrence said. "Naomi has been making violent threats all morning. When we tried to calm her down, she grabbed the baby and threatened to drop her. I had to wrestle the child away from her before she threw herself on the ground screaming about trust funds. She is completely detached from reality." That was the final nail in my coffin. 2 family members and the brother-in-law corroborating the exact same horrifying story. I screamed Elijah's name, begging for someone to believe me, but my voice was completely drowned out by their coordinated lies. The doctor nodded firmly, stepping back from the chaotic scene. "Administer 5 milligrams of Haldol immediately," he ordered. "We need to sedate her to prevent self-harm and secure the infant. Call the psychiatric evaluation team and flag this for Child Protective Services." "No!" I shrieked, kicking my legs as 2 security guards pinned my shoulders to the floor. "Do not touch me. Where is my baby? Give me my baby." The panic consuming me was worse than the physical pain of my torn abdomen. I saw a nurse approach with a syringe, her face a mask of clinical detachment. I fought with everything I had, refusing to become a victim. But my body was broken from surgery, and the guards were too strong. I felt the cold swipe of an alcohol pad, followed by the sharp sting of the needle piercing my muscle. The heavy liquid pushed into my bloodstream. Within seconds, the edges of my vision began to blur. The frantic energy in the room started to slow down, turning the voices into distorted underwater echoes. I tried to keep my eyes open, focusing on the small bundle wrapped in a pink striped hospital blanket. A nurse had scooped Zuri up and was cradling her tightly against her chest. My innocent daughter was crying, reaching her tiny fists into the air. Please, I mumbled, my tongue feeling thick and heavy. Please do not take her. The nurse looked down at me with profound pity before turning away. We are taking the infant to the neonatal observation unit for her own safety, the nurse announced to my mother. She will be secure there until Child Protective Services conducts their evaluation. Beatrice nodded, wiping a fake tear from her cheek. Thank you for saving my granddaughter from this tragedy, Beatrice said loudly enough for the hallway to hear. As the guards released my arms and lifted me back onto the hospital bed, my limbs felt like useless lead. The sedative was pulling me under, dragging me down into a dark void. Before the darkness consumed me, Beatrice leaned over the bedrail. She brushed a sweaty braid away from my face, masquerading as a loving mother saying goodbye. But as her face hovered inches from my ear, her voice dropped to a sinister whisper. Sign the trust fund papers tomorrow morning, Naomi, or I swear to God, Child Protective Services takes that baby away from you forever. A cold, satisfied smile spread across her face as she turned her back to walk out with Jada and Terrence. The wooden door swung shut, leaving me completely alone in the sterile silence. The sedative dragged me down into a deep, dreamless sleep, where the agony of my torn stitches and the terror of losing my child vanished into nothingness. I do not know how long I was out. When I dragged myself back to consciousness, the room was pitch black. The only light came from the green glow of the heart monitor. My mouth was bone dry and my head pounded with a dull ache from the medication. I tried to sit up, but my abdominal muscles screamed in protest, a sharp reminder of the assault. Zuri. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was completely alone. My baby was gone, locked away, while Child Protective Services built a case against me based entirely on vicious lies. Panic started to rise in my chest, tightening my throat. They were going to take her. They were going to steal Elijah's legacy and take the only piece of him I had left. I shifted my weight, trying to find a position that did not pull at my incision. As I moved, my hand brushed against something hard, tucked deep beneath my blankets near my hip. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Slowly, I slid my fingers under the thin hospital sheet. It was a small rectangular object, cold to the touch. I pulled it out, holding it up in the dim light. It was a cheap, prepaid burner phone. A small piece of white medical tape was stuck to the back of it. Written on the tape in extremely neat, precise handwriting were exactly 2 words: "Call Sterling." I stared at the name written on the tape. Sterling. He was the wealth manager for Elijah's family estate back in Atlanta. A ruthless old money tactician who treated the family fortune like a fortress. Before I could even process how a burner phone ended up in my bed, the heavy door of my room clicked open. I instinctively shoved the phone back under the blankets, my heart hammering against my ribs. A sliver of light from the hallway spilled across the floor and a silhouette slipped inside, shutting the door quietly. It was one of the nurses from the day shift. Her name tag read Kenya. She was a tall, sharp-looking black woman who had been standing near the back of the room during my mother's theatrical performance. She did not turn on the main lights. Instead, she walked over to my bedside, using only the dim glow of the monitors to see my face. "You found the phone," Kenya whispered, her voice barely carrying over the hum of the machines. I nodded slowly, my grip tightening on the plastic device hidden beneath the sheets. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, my voice raspy. Kenya crossed her arms. "I have been a nurse for 15 years, Naomi. I know what postpartum psychosis looks like. I also know what a liar looks like. Your mother walked out of this room crying hysterically, but the second she hit the elevator lobby, she stopped. She fixed her lipstick, pulled out a compact mirror, and told your sister to make sure the lawyers were ready for 9 in the morning. My blood ran cold. "Lawyers?" I asked. Kenya leaned closer. "She is filing for emergency conservatorship first thing tomorrow. She has the attending physician wrapped around her finger, and she is using the sedative incident to prove you are mentally incapacitated. If a judge signs that order, she gets full control over your medical decisions, your baby, and every single bank account in your name. You need to fight back tonight." I closed my eyes, fighting the wave of nausea that washed over me. An emergency conservatorship. Beatrice was not just trying to steal Elijah's trust fund, she was trying to strip away my entire existence. She wanted to turn me into a legal ghost trapped in a psychiatric ward while she paraded around Atlanta playing the wealthy matriarch. I will not let her take my daughter, I whispered fiercely. I will not let her win. Kenya nodded, handing me a sealed bottle of water. I am off shift in 10 minutes. I made sure the night nurse assigned to you is tied up on the other end of the floor. You have a window of absolute privacy. Use it. Do not let that woman destroy your life. With a final encouraging look, Kenya slipped out of the room as silently as she had entered. I was alone again, but this time I was armed. I pulled the burner phone from under the covers. My hands were shaking from the lingering effects of the sedative, but my mind was snapping into sharp focus. The scapegoat narrative was over. It was time to go to war. I dialed the number I knew by heart. It rang twice before a deep, gravelly voice answered on the other end. Sterling speaking. Sterling, it is Naomi, I said, keeping my voice low but firm. There was a sharp intake of breath on the line. Naomi, where are you calling from? Elijah's mother has been trying to reach you all evening. The hospital told us you were heavily sedated and unable to take calls. They lied, I said, gripping the phone tightly. My mother staged an assault. She dragged me out of my hospital bed, tore my C-section incision, and then told the doctors I was having a psychotic break. They took Zuri. Sterling, she is filing for emergency conservatorship at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. She wants the $74 million trust fund. The silence on the line was lethal. Sterling was a man who handled billions of dollars. He navigated corporate mergers, hostile takeovers, and generational wealth disputes. He did not tolerate disrespect toward the family he protected. I am dispatching our legal team right now, Sterling said, his voice dropping to a dangerously calm octave. We will file an immediate injunction to block any conservatorship motions. I am also sending private security to that hospital. Nobody is touching Elijah's daughter. Nobody is touching you. Thank you, Sterling, I said, taking a ragged breath. But blocking the conservatorship is not enough. We need to go on the offensive. I need you to answer a question for me. Name it, he said. Why exactly $74 million, I asked. Beatrice and Terrence brought transfer papers for the entire trust fund. They did not ask for a monthly allowance. They did not ask for a $1 million payout. They wanted the entire sum transferred immediately. People do not move that aggressively unless they are running out of time. I need you to find out exactly what Terrence is hiding. Sterling caught on immediately. You think they are trying to cover a massive debt? I know they are, I replied. 5 years ago, I paid $50,000 to bail Terrence out of a bad real estate deal so Jada would not lose her townhouse. They act wealthy, but they have always lived on credit and lies. Follow the money, Sterling. Find out who Terrence owes and why he needs it by tomorrow. I am putting my best private investigators on it immediately, Sterling promised. Sit tight, Naomi. Stay awake. Do not sign anything. I will call you the second I have a clear picture. I ended the call and slipped the phone back under the mattress. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins, fighting against the heavy pull of the psychiatric drugs still lingering in my system. The physical pain from my torn stitches was excruciating. It felt like hot knives slicing across my lower abdomen every time I took a breath. About an hour later, the night nurse walked in holding a small paper cup with 2 pills. Doctor ordered some strong pain medication for you, she said, approaching the bed with a sympathetic smile. This will help you sleep through the night. I looked at the pills and then up at her. No, thank you, I said, my voice steady. I do not want any medication. The nurse frowned, looking confused. Honey, your chart says you suffered a severe fall. Your incision is inflamed. You are going to be in absolute agony if you do not take these. I am fine. I lied, gripping the bed rails under the blanket to hide my trembling hands. I prefer a clear head. She tried to insist, but I flatly refused. I could not afford to be drugged. I could not afford to be sleepy or compliant. The pain was my anchor. Every stab of agony in my stomach was a reminder of what Beatrice had done to me. Every wave of nausea was a reminder of my daughter locked in a neonatal ward surrounded by strangers. I embraced the pain. It fueled my rage and sharpened my focus. The hours dragged on like a slow torture. The hospital room was silent, except for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock. My mind raced, piecing together every strange comment, every lavish purchase, every fake flex Jada and Terrence had posted online over the past year. Jada's brand new Mercedes, Terrence's sudden trips to Dubai, Beatrice's massive donations to her megachurch to secure her position as the head deaconess. They were spending money like water, but neither Terrence nor Jada had a legitimate source of high-level income. It was all a facade, a carefully constructed house of cards. And clearly the wind was about to blow it down. I stared at the ceiling, channeling my inner strength. For 34 years I had played the role of the dutiful, obedient daughter. I had swallowed the insults, the colorist remarks, the constant comparisons to my sister. I had paid their bills and saved their pride just to earn a scrap of maternal affection. But pulling me by my hair and taking my child was the ultimate fatal mistake. Beatrice thought she was dealing with the broken little girl who used to cry in her bedroom. She forgot that I was a financial technology founder. She forgot that I had built my own company before I ever met Elijah. She forgot that I knew how to destroy a person on paper. As the clock ticked closer to dawn, the silence in the room became almost deafening. The pain in my abdomen had settled into a relentless burning throb, but my mind was completely lucid. I ran through every possible scenario, planning my next moves with cold, clinical precision. I was going to strip them of everything they valued: their money, their social standing, their fake church reputation. At exactly 4 o'clock in the morning, the burner phone vibrated violently against my hip. I pulled it out and answered immediately. "Sterling." Naomi Sterling said, his voice completely devoid of its usual calm professionalism. "I have the entire picture. You need to brace yourself because this is much worse than a bad real estate deal." "Tell me," I demanded, ignoring the sharp pain in my gut. "Your brother-in-law is not an entrepreneur," Sterling said, the words hitting me like heavy stones. "He does not run a legitimate investment firm. It is a massive Ponzi scheme. He has been running a fraudulent cryptocurrency fund for the past 2 years. I closed my eyes, absorbing the shock. A Ponzi scheme. How much did he steal? I asked. "Over $40 million, Sterling replied. "But Naomi, that is not the worst part. He did not scam Wall Street investors or random billionaires. He targeted vulnerable people." "What do you mean?" I asked, a cold dread washing over me. "Beatrice used her position in the church," Sterling explained, his tone filled with absolute disgust. "Your mother personally convinced hundreds of elderly Black congregants to empty their pensions and retirement savings into Terrence's fake fund. She promised them divine financial returns. She vouched for him." My breath caught in my throat. My mother had stolen from her own church community. She had robbed grandmothers and grandfathers of their life savings to fund Jada's designer bags and Terrence's luxury cars. The sheer evil of it was staggering. "The fund has officially collapsed." Sterling continued, his pace quickening. "Terrence missed a massive payout deadline on Friday. The church elders have called a mandatory emergency meeting for tomorrow morning to demand their money back. If Terrence does not show up with the cash, the elders are going straight to the authorities." I gripped the phone tightly, my knuckles turning white. "That is why they need the $74 million, I whispered, the entire puzzle finally snapping into place. "They need Elijah's trust fund to refund the church accounts and cover their tracks before anyone finds out the money is gone." "Exactly," Sterling said. "But it is already too late. My investigators found out that 2 prominent church members already filed complaints earlier this week. Naomi, your brother-in-law is about to be indicted by the feds. The Securities and Exchange Commission and the FBI are finalizing arrest warrants as we speak." This was the moment of absolute truth. I was ready to destroy them completely now. I gripped the burner phone so hard my knuckles ached. Sterling's words echoed in the small, dark hospital room. A Ponzi scheme. My mother, a senior deaconess at Greater Hope Cathedral, had orchestrated a massive financial scam targeting her own congregation. The sheer scale of the betrayal was suffocating. I needed Sterling to walk me through every single detail. "Explain it to me from the beginning." "Sterling, I demanded, ignoring the sharp burning sensation radiating from my surgical incision. How exactly did Terrence pull this off? It started 2 years ago. Sterling began, his voice dropping into the clinical, precise cadence he used during board meetings. Terrence set up a shell company called Apex Digital Holdings. He branded it as an exclusive cryptocurrency investment firm, promising guaranteed monthly returns of 12%. In the financial world, a guaranteed 12% return is a glaring red flag for fraud. But Terrence was not targeting financial experts or seasoned venture capitalists. He was targeting people who did not understand blockchain or crypto markets. He targeted the church, I said, the sick realization settling heavily in my stomach. Exactly, Sterling confirmed. But Terrence is a known hustler. He has no credibility. He could not have gained the trust of those people on his own. He needed a Trojan horse. He needed someone the congregation trusted implicitly. He needed your mother. I closed my eyes. Beatrice had been a pillar of Greater Hope Cathedral for decades. She sat on the front pew, wore her oversized designer hats, and directed the usher board with an iron fist. In our community, the church is sacred. It is a place of refuge, of trust, of deep generational bonds. For a senior deaconess to exploit that sacred trust was not just illegal. It was a spiritual and cultural violation of the highest order. Tell me what she did, I said, my voice turning to ice. Beatrice hosted private investment seminars after Sunday service, Sterling explained. She invited the elderly members of the congregation, widows, retired factory workers, teachers who had saved their pennies for 40 years. She told them that Terrence had cracked the code to generational wealth. She used the language of the church to manipulate them, calling Apex Digital Holdings a financial ministry designed to uplift the Black community. She convinced them to hand over their retirement portfolios, their pensions, and the equity in their paid-off homes. My breathing grew shallow. My mother had looked those hard-working, God-fearing people in the eye, prayed with them, and then handed their life savings over to Terrence so Jada could post pictures of her new Mercedes on social media. How much did they lose? I asked, bracing myself for the answer. Over $40 million, Sterling replied grimly. Terrence used the classic Ponzi structure. He took the money from the new investors to pay the fake returns to the early investors. It created the illusion of staggering success. Beatrice paraded those early investors in front of the congregation, having them give tearful, emotional testimonials during Sunday service about their massive financial blessings. That brought in even more victims. People mortgaged their family homes because they trusted your mother. But the vast majority of the money went straight to offshore accounts, luxury car dealerships, and Jada's excessive designer shopping sprees. They bought matching Rolex watches and took first-class trips to Dubai using money meant for nursing home care and grandchildren's college tuitions. And now the money is gone, I stated. Completely gone, Sterling confirmed. The crypto market dipped 6 months ago and Terrence panicked. He made several highly leveraged, incredibly stupid trades trying to recover the funds he and Jada had spent. He lost everything. The fund has been technically insolvent for months. He has been stalling the investors by claiming there was a temporary freeze on crypto withdrawals due to federal banking audits. I scoffed softly in the dark. It was a pathetic excuse, but to elderly people who barely understood how to use a smartphone, a fake federal audit sounded plausible enough to buy Terrence a little more time. But time ran out on Friday. Sterling continued, the urgency returning to his voice. Terrence had promised a massive quarterly dividend payout to a group of influential church elders. When the money did not materialize, the elders demanded a face-to-face meeting. They requested full access to the firm's financial ledgers. Terrence panicked and fled the meeting. That is when the house of cards collapsed. So the church knows, I said. They suspect, Sterling corrected. The elders have called a mandatory closed-door emergency meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. They have ordered Beatrice and Terrence to appear and present the financial records. If they do not show up with the money, the elders are going straight to the police. But it gets much worse for your family, Naomi. How could it possibly get worse than stealing $40 million from grandmothers, I asked. Because the feds are already watching, Sterling revealed. My private investigators tapped into some high-level federal contacts. The Securities and Exchange Commission flagged Apex Digital Holdings 3 months ago for unregistered securities violations. The FBI opened a parallel investigation into wire fraud and money laundering. They have been quietly building a massive federal case against Terrence. Two of the church members who grew suspicious last week actually bypassed the church elders and filed formal complaints directly with the authorities. A cold, sharp thrill ran down my spine. The federal government was preparing to drop the hammer. When are they making the arrests? I asked. Monday morning, Sterling said. The federal agents are finalizing the warrants right now. They are planning to raid Terrence's office and Beatrice's home at dawn on Monday. The only thing that could temporarily stall the federal indictments and appease the church elders is a massive immediate injection of legitimate capital. They need to make the accounts whole before the elders go to the police, and they need to show the feds that the firm has actual liquidity to cover the investor funds. They need my $74 million, I said, the final horrific puzzle piece snapping perfectly into place. Exactly, Sterling agreed. If Beatrice and Terrence can walk into that church meeting tomorrow morning and transfer $40 million back into the congregation's accounts, they can claim the delay was just a banking error. They can use the remaining $34 million to pay off the federal fines, hire high-powered defense attorneys, and try to flee the country before the FBI can execute the wire fraud warrants. Your husband's trust fund is their literal ticket to freedom. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal hit me so hard I felt physically sick. I clutched the burner phone to my ear, staring blindly at the dark ceiling of the hospital room. I replayed the events of the past 24 hours in my head. The violent ambush in my recovery room, the forged transfer documents, the way my mother had grabbed my hair and dragged me off the bed, tearing my surgical wounds open without a single ounce of hesitation. She did not attack me because she thought I was an unfit mother. She attacked me because she was a desperate, cornered criminal facing a decade in federal prison. And then came the darkest realization of all. The absolute unforgivable truth that destroyed any lingering shred of familial loyalty I had left. My mother had thrown herself on the floor. She had cried fake tears to the doctors. She had used the racist, weaponized stereotype of the angry, unstable black woman to have me forcibly sedated. She had allowed Child Protective Services to take my newborn daughter, throwing my innocent baby into the foster care system. She was willing to let me rot in a psychiatric ward for the rest of my life. She was willing to let Zuri grow up an orphan, separated from her mother, stripped of her father's legacy. She was willing to destroy my entire existence, steal my sanity, and sacrifice her own granddaughter's safety, all for one reason. She wanted to save her fake, glamorous reputation at the church and keep her scammer son-in-law out of federal prison. Elijah had worked his entire life to build that trust fund for our children. He had poured his blood, sweat, and tears into ensuring our family would have generational wealth. My mother wanted to hijack my dead husband's legacy to pay off her dirty debts. My mother did not see me as a human being. I was just collateral damage, a highly convenient scapegoat whose life could be completely extinguished to cover up her massive, sickening crimes. My chest heaved. The physical pain of my torn stitches was nothing compared to the ice-cold rage that was now freezing my veins. For 34 years I had tried to be the good daughter. I had accepted the emotional abuse. I had allowed them to treat me like a second-class citizen while they worshipped Jada. I had even paid their debts, but this was unforgivable. This was war. Sterling, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet calm. I am here, Naomi, he replied, instantly sensing the profound shift in my demeanor. I am not just going to block the conservatorship, I stated, the words tasting like iron on my tongue. I am going to let them think they have won. I am going to walk right into their trap, and then I am going to bury them so deep they will never see the light of day again. Sterling did not hesitate. Tell me exactly what you need me to do. I took a deep breath, letting the silence hang in the air for a brief moment. We are going to burn their entire empire to the ground, I said. I will need your security team ready by dawn. The first rays of sunlight crept through the hospital window, casting long, pale shadows across the sterile linoleum floor. I had not slept a single second since my conversation with Sterling. My mind had been running 1,000,000 miles an hour, calculating every variable, anticipating every move. I carefully slid the burner phone back under my mattress just as heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway. I adjusted my posture, making myself look as small and fragile as possible. I let my shoulders slump and allowed the genuine physical exhaustion from my surgery to wash over my features. The heavy wooden door swung open. Beatrice walked in first. She had clearly gone home to shower and change. She was wearing a tailored emerald green suit with a matching silk scarf draped over her shoulder, looking every bit the wealthy, pious matriarch she pretended to be. Jada followed close behind, holding a fresh cup of artisan coffee, checking her reflection in her phone screen. Terrence brought up the rear, looking arrogant and entirely too comfortable in a custom-tailored blazer that he bought with stolen retirement funds. They moved into the room with an undeniable swagger. There was no concern for my torn incision. There was no panic about the supposedly psychotic episode I had experienced the day before. They looked at me not with pity, but with the smug satisfaction of predators who had finally cornered their prey. Beatrice stood at the foot of my hospital bed, clasping her hands together. Her eyes swept over my tangled hair and my pale face. "Well, Naomi," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I hope the medication helped calm your nerves. You gave us quite a scare yesterday." This was it. Action. I let out a ragged breath, forcing my lower lip to tremble. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing out the tears I had been holding back. The crying was not entirely fake. I thought about Zuri alone in a neonatal unit surrounded by strangers, and the tears flowed freely, hot and fast down my cheeks. "Where is my baby?" I choked out, letting my voice crack and pitch upward in desperation. "Please, Mom. Where is Zuri? What did they do to her?" Beatrice exchanged a triumphant look with Terrence. Jada took a sip of her coffee and rolled her eyes, making no effort to hide her disgust. "She is safe," Naomi, Beatrice said, adopting a condescendingly soothing tone. "She is in protective custody. The hospital social worker and child protective services are reviewing your file this morning. They are very concerned about your violent outburst." I sobbed louder, wrapping my arms around my injured abdomen, rocking back and forth as if the grief was physically tearing me apart. "Please," I begged, staring up at them with wide, terrified eyes. "I will do anything. Please do not let them take her away from me. She is all I have left of Elijah. Please, Mom, tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I'm fine." Terrence stepped forward, resting his hands on the bed rail. He leaned in close, his cologne smelling sharp and expensive. "It is not that simple, Naomi," he said softly. "The doctors saw you screaming. They saw you thrashing around on the floor. If Beatrice signs the affidavit confirming your mental instability, the state will take emergency custody of the child. You will be locked in a psychiatric facility for a mandatory 60-day evaluation." I covered my face with my hands, weeping loudly into my palms. Inside my head, my thoughts were razor sharp. I was analyzing their every word, noting the precise legal threats they were using to extort me. They had thought of everything using the exact bureaucratic terror tactics that historically destroy Black mothers in the system. I needed them to believe I was completely broken. I dropped my hands and looked at Beatrice, my chest heaving. "What do you want?" I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. "I know you did not come here just to tell me I am losing my daughter. Tell me what I have to do to make this go away." Beatrice smiled, a tight, victorious smirk that barely reached her eyes. She reached into her emerald green designer bag and pulled out a thick leather portfolio. She laid it on the rolling tray table and pushed it over my lap. "You have always been so stubborn," Naomi, Beatrice said, smoothing the lapels of her suit. "Elijah left you with a massive burden. $74 million is too much responsibility for a grieving single mother struggling with severe postpartum depression. Terrence and I are stepping in to help you manage this burden so you can focus on getting your mind right." Jada finally looked up from her phone. "Just sign the papers, Naomi. We are doing you a favor." I stared at the leather portfolio, acting as though it were a ticking bomb. I looked back up at Beatrice, trembling violently. "If I sign this, you will tell the doctors I am sane," I asked, my voice shaking. "You will get Zuri back for me." Beatrice nodded, but her expression turned deadly serious. Yes, but there is a specific way this has to happen. You cannot just sign these here in the hospital. The lawyers say it might look coerced given your supposed mental state yesterday. We need to do this publicly to show you are of sound mind and acting out of your own generous free will. I blinked, staring at her in manufactured confusion. Publicly, what do you mean? Beatrice stood taller, puffing out her chest, adjusting her silk scarf. Tomorrow morning, our church is hosting the annual Women of Excellence Gala. It is a major event. Hundreds of people will be there, including the church elders and several prominent community leaders. I have already spoken to the pastor. We have arranged a special segment of the program to honor Elijah's memory. I gripped the hospital blankets tightly. And what exactly am I supposed to do at this gala? Terence answered for her. You are going to get dressed up, look beautiful, and walk onto that stage. You are going to give a short speech about how much the church has meant to your family during this difficult time. And then you are going to sign these transfer documents live on stage. You will present the $74 million as a family philanthropy donation to a specialized trust managed by me and your mother. A family philanthropy donation. The sheer brilliance of their criminal minds was almost impressive. By forcing me to sign the money over as a highly publicized philanthropic transfer, they were creating the ultimate cover story. When the federal investigators looked into the sudden massive influx of cash into Terrence's accounts, Beatrice could point to the church gala. She could claim it was a legitimate, well-documented charitable gift from her wealthy, grieving daughter, entirely separate from his failing investment firm. It was the perfect money laundering scheme designed to appease the angry church elders and blindside the federal agents all at once. I looked at Terrence, acting completely bewildered and terrified. But why does it have to be tomorrow morning? I asked, letting a note of frantic panic slip into my voice. Why can I not just sign it now and go home with my baby? Why do we have to wait? Terrence's jaw clenched. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the desperate cornered animal beneath the expensive suit. Because the gala is tomorrow, he snapped sharply. And the paperwork needs to be filed before the banks open on Monday. Do not ask stupid questions, Naomi. Just do what you are told. Beatrice shot Terrence a warning glare before turning her maternal gaze back to me. She reached out and patted my leg, her touch feeling like a crawling spider on my skin. We just want to make sure your husband's legacy is celebrated properly, sweetheart, she cooed softly. We want the whole congregation to see what a generous, God-fearing woman you really are. Once you sign the documents on that stage, I will personally walk over to the hospital administration. I will tell them the medication worked a miracle, that you are completely lucid, and that I am taking full responsibility for you and my granddaughter. I looked down at the leather portfolio resting against my thighs. I bit my lip, forcing fresh tears to spill over my eyelashes. Okay, I whispered, my voice breaking with absolute perfection. I will sign the papers tomorrow morning at the church. Just promise I get Zuri back immediately. Beatrice beamed with triumphant greed. She leaned over and kissed my forehead. That is my good girl, she said softly. They turned and walked out, clicking the heavy door shut behind them. The room fell silent. I stopped crying instantly. My face went ice cold. I will destroy them. I reached under the mattress and pulled out the burner phone before the sound of my family's retreating footsteps even faded from the hospital corridor. My fingers flew across the keypad, dialing Sterling's number. He answered on the first ring, as if he had been sitting with his phone in his hand waiting for my signal. They took the bait. I said, my voice low and steady. Beatrice wants me to sign the trust over tomorrow morning at her Women of Excellence church gala. She wants to frame it as a family philanthropy donation in front of the entire congregation to make the transfer look completely legitimate for the federal investigators. She thinks she has me completely trapped. Sterling let out a dark, low chuckle. A public donation. That is brilliant in a desperate sociopathic kind of way. It explains why they need you physically present and publicly compliant. They are using the church as a shield. Are you going to be able to endure this, Naomi? You just had major surgery and your body is traumatized. You have been through absolute hell. I do not care about the physical pain, I replied, my grip tightening on the plastic phone. I only care about securing my daughter and destroying their lives. I need you to unleash hell, Sterling. Do whatever it takes. Spare no expense. Bring down the full weight of Elijah's estate on their heads. They thought they could break me, but they only woke me up. Consider it done, Sterling promised. But we have a major obstacle. As long as that hospital record claims you had a psychotic break, Beatrice holds the legal upper hand. She can still file for that emergency conservatorship in the morning and block your ability to do anything. We need to legally invalidate that diagnosis before the sun comes up. How do we do that? I asked. The attending physician already wrote it in my chart. He bought her lies completely. We go over his head, Sterling said simply. I am sending someone up to your room right now. Be ready. Less than 30 minutes later, a soft knock sounded at my door. Nurse Kenya slipped inside, accompanied by a tall, distinguished black man with silver hair, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. He carried a heavy leather briefcase and moved with quiet, undeniable authority. I recognized him immediately. It was Dr. Marcus Vance, the chief of psychiatry for the entire regional hospital network, and a lifelong friend of Elijah's family. He had been Elijah's father's fraternity brother, and he viewed Elijah like a nephew. He was a man of immense power in this city. Naomi, Dr. Vance said, stepping to the side of my bed. His voice was warm but entirely professional. Sterling called me. I am so terribly sorry for your loss and for what you are enduring tonight. But we do not have much time. I need to conduct a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation right here, right now, to officially override the attending physician's notes. I nodded, sitting up as straight as my torn incision would allow. I am ready, Dr. Vance. For the next hour, he put me through a rigorous clinical assessment. He asked me complex questions about my medical history, my current emotional state, the events leading up to the assault, and my understanding of reality. I answered every single question with absolute clarity. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I detailed the financial motives behind my mother's actions, laying out the logic of the Ponzi scheme and the looming federal indictments with the precision of the financial technology executive that I was. I explained exactly why Beatrice needed to label me as incompetent to steal the money. Dr. Vance took meticulous notes, his expression growing darker and more resolute with every detail I shared. When the evaluation was complete, he clicked his pen shut and opened his leather briefcase. He pulled out a stack of official hospital forms stamped with his credentialed seal. You are experiencing entirely normal grief and understandable distress due to physical trauma, Dr. Vance stated, looking me directly in the eyes. You are 100% sane, completely lucid, and demonstrating zero signs of postpartum psychosis or any other psychiatric disorder. The attending physician made a grossly negligent diagnostic error based entirely on your mother's fabricated testimony. He fell for a racist trope and it will be addressed. He signed his name across the bottom of the paperwork, pressing his official administrative seal onto the pages. This is an ironclad medical affidavit, he continued, handing a copy to me and giving the original to Nurse Kenya. As the chief of psychiatry, my evaluation completely supersedes the attending doctor's notes. Beatrice has absolutely no medical grounds to file a conservatorship. Legally, her entire narrative is dead. She cannot touch you. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for hours. The heavy, suffocating weight of being trapped in the system suddenly lifted. The relief was overwhelming, but we were not done yet. Nurse Kenya stepped forward, her eyes shining with quiet, fierce determination. I have something else that is going to bury them, she said. She pulled a hospital-issue tablet from her scrub pocket and tapped the screen. As the charge nurse on this floor, I have the legal authority to request immediate review of hallway security footage if I suspect an incident of patient abuse. I pulled the tapes from the cameras right outside your suite. Kenya handed the tablet to me. I stared at the screen, pressing play. The camera angle was perfect, positioned at the end of the hallway, pointing directly into my room through the wide double doors. Because Terrence had not completely closed the heavy door before the assault, the camera captured everything through the gap. I watched the silent footage play out in high definition. I saw Beatrice slam the folder onto my lap. I saw me refusing. And then I saw the horrific, undeniable truth. Beatrice lunging forward, grabbing my braids and violently ripping me right off the edge of the mattress, my body hitting the floor. Terrence quickly moving to block the doorway, ensuring no one could get in to help me. Jada standing in the corner looking at her fingernails while I writhed in agony on the cold tile. I could see the pure malice in my mother's eyes even through the grainy security feed. She was a monster hiding behind church hats and scripture. It was chilling to watch my own family treat me like an animal. The hospital's risk management team has already secured this file. Kenya explained, her voice tight with anger. It is logged, time-stamped, and preserved in the hospital's central server. They cannot delete it, and they cannot deny it. It is raw, unedited proof of criminal assault. Beatrice is going to rot in a cell for this. I want a copy of this sent to Sterling immediately, I said, handing the tablet back to her. Send it directly to his encrypted server. I'm going to make sure the entire congregation sees exactly what their beloved senior deaconess does behind closed doors. They will know the monster she truly is. Kenya nodded, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. Already done, Naomi. Sterling has the file. Just as she spoke, the burner phone vibrated against the bed sheets. It was Sterling. Dr. Vance gave me a reassuring nod and stepped out into the hallway with Kenya to finalize the medical override in the hospital's system, leaving me alone to take the call. The wheels were turning fast now. Sterling, we have the affidavit, I said, answering the phone. Dr. Vance cleared me. The psychosis diagnosis is completely legally invalidated. I know, Sterling replied, his voice crackling with intense energy. Vance just uploaded the documents to our legal portal. My security team is already mobilizing to extract your daughter from the neonatal unit, using the chief of psychiatry's clearance. We are getting Zuri out of there right now. She will be safe. Thank God, I whispered, the greatest source of my panic finally resolving. What about the feds? Are they set for the church gala? The SEC and FBI have confirmed the location, Sterling said. They are allowing Beatrice and Terrence to show up at the church because it guarantees all the suspects will be gathered in one enclosed space. The raid is scheduled for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Everything was falling perfectly into place. The trap was set and my family was walking blindly right into the center of it. I was going to ruin them completely. But then Sterling paused. The line went silent for a few seconds, a heavy, pregnant pause that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My intuition flared instantly. Sterling, I asked, gripping the phone tightly. What is it? What is going on? Naomi, he began, his tone shifting from tactical triumph to something much darker and far more hesitant. While my team was running the forensic trace on Beatrice's assets to prepare the foreclosure paperwork, we dug into her personal credit history. I was trying to find out exactly how she managed to fund her lifestyle before Terrence's crypto scam started generating cash. She lived way above her means for years. And what did you find? I asked, bracing myself against the pillows. You might want to sit down for this, Sterling said, his voice grim and heavy with dread. Because it gets worse. I held my breath, bracing myself against the stark white hospital pillows. What could possibly be worse than stealing $40 million from elderly church members and trying to lock your own daughter in a psychiatric ward? Tell me, I commanded, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Tell me exactly what you found, Sterling. I heard the rustle of papers on his end of the line. Your mother's $2.5 million luxury estate in Buckhead, Sterling, began, his tone heavy with disgust. The one she constantly flexes on social media. The one where she hosts all her high society church dinners. It is not in her name, Naomi. She never had the credit score or the legitimate income to secure a mortgage of that magnitude. Then whose name is on the deed? I asked, though a sickening pit was already opening in my stomach. Yours, Sterling said bluntly. Beatrice used your social security number 5 years ago to secure the mortgage. She forged your signature on the loan documents. She manipulated the employment verification using her connections. She essentially stole your financial identity to buy herself a mansion. The room spun. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to process the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. 5 years ago, I had just started my financial technology company. I was working 20-hour days, sleeping on a terrible mattress, and eating cheap noodles just to keep my business afloat. I had trusted my mother with my personal documents when she offered to help me file some early tax paperwork. She had weaponized that trust to buy a sprawling estate while I was grinding my bones to dust. She had literally built her kingdom on my back. And that is not all. Sterling continued, his voice growing even colder. My team dug deeper into the credit lines associated with your social security number. The fraudulent mortgage was just the beginning. Jada's luxury cars are also in your name. Both the Mercedes she drives now and the Range Rover she had before it were leased using your identity. Terrence's initial seed money, the capital he used to rent that flashy downtown office and print his fake marketing brochures for his Ponzi scheme, was funded by massive business credit cards opened under your corporate identity. I felt a physical pain in my chest that had nothing to do with my surgical incision. They had bled me dry. Every single aspect of their glamorous fake lives was funded by my stolen identity. Jida flaunting her designer clothes and luxury vehicles, looking down on me for working too hard. Terrence acting like a self-made mogul, treating me with blatant disrespect. Beatrice playing the blessed, highly favored matriarch of the church. It was all a grand, disgusting illusion paid for with my credit. They used my name to fund the very scheme that robbed the church, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of absolute rage and profound horror. If the federal investigators trace the seed money back to those credit cards, they could try to implicate me in the Ponzi scheme. Beatrice did not just steal my identity, Sterling. She set me up to take the fall if Terrence ever got caught. She built a back door to throw me to the wolves. Sterling let out a sharp breath. That is exactly what my legal team concluded, Naomi. It is a classic criminal insulation tactic. If the feds followed the paper trail without knowing about the identity theft, they would see your name on the foundational credit lines. Beatrice probably planned to use your financial success as a shield, claiming you were the silent backer of the operation. She was willing to let you go to federal prison to save her golden child and her scammer son-in-law. The sheer calculated evil of my own mother left me speechless. She had dragged me by my hair today, but she had been quietly destroying my life for half a decade. She had handed my future over to Terrence and Jada on a silver platter. I gripped the burner phone so tightly my knuckles ached. The sadness was completely gone now. There was no grief left for the family I thought I had. There was only a burning, consuming desire for absolute destruction. We can freeze the accounts immediately, Sterling advised. I can have my legal team draft identity theft affidavits. We will contact the credit bureaus, flag the fraudulent accounts, and pay off the outstanding balances using Elijah's estate funds to protect your credit score. We can quietly settle the debt and hand the evidence over to the authorities. It will keep your name completely clean and safe. No, I said sharply. The word echoed off the cold hospital walls. I do not want to pay off the debt. I do not want to quietly settle anything. If we pay off the mortgage, Beatrice gets to keep pretending she is a victim of Terrence's scam. If we clear the car loans, Jada gets to walk away unscathed. I want them to feel the full devastating weight of what they have done. Sterling paused. Then what is your next play, Naomi? I want you to buy the debt I instructed. Use the estate's private equity arm. Contact the bank that holds the mortgage on the Buckhead mansion. Buy the paper. I want to own the mortgage. I want to own the car loans. I want to hold every single cent of their fraudulent debt in my own hands. A dark, satisfied silence settled over the line. Sterling was a ruthless operator, and he instantly recognized the beauty of my plan. By purchasing the debt directly, we would bypass the slow, bureaucratic process of the banks. We would become the primary creditors. We would hold the keys to their entire fake kingdom. And once we own the debt, Sterling asked, you initiate an immediate aggressive foreclosure, I commanded. No warning letters, no 30-day grace periods. The loan was secured under fraudulent terms, which means it is in immediate default. I want the deed to that house. I want the titles to those cars. I want you to draw up the eviction notices right now. They think they are walking into a glorious church gala tomorrow to secure $74 million. I want to hand them absolute ruin instead. Consider it done, Sterling said. I will wake up the senior partners at the bank. We will acquire the debt portfolios before the sun fully rises. By the time Beatrice steps up to that church podium, you will be the legal owner of her house and Jada's vehicles. The eviction notices will be ready. Make sure the foreclosure documents clearly state the reason for immediate seizure is verified identity theft and loan fraud, I added. I want it on official legal paper. I want no room for Beatrice to spin a sob story. She needs to face the cold, hard facts. It will be bulletproof, Sterling promised. Now, what about the federal authorities? The SEC and the FBI are still planning to raid Terrence's office on Monday morning. They are not aware of the church gala tomorrow. That is the final piece of the puzzle, I said. We are not going to let them wait until Monday. Terrence and Beatrice are desperate to use the church gala to publicly launder the trust fund money. If the feds wait until Monday, Terrence might panic and try to flee the country. We cannot give them that chance. We need to serve them on a silver platter. You want me to tip off the feds? Sterling asked. Yes, I said firmly. Call your contacts at the FBI and the SEC right now. Tell them the entire leadership of the Ponzi scheme will be gathered tomorrow morning. Tell them they are attempting a massive secondary wire fraud using a church charity event as a front. Give them the exact address of Greater Hope Cathedral. Sterling typed furiously on his keyboard in the background. What time should I tell them to arrive? The gala program starts at 9, I said. Beatrice will schedule my supposed philanthropic donation for the very end of the event, right before the closing prayer. Tell the federal agents to breach the banquet hall at exactly 10:15 in the morning. I want them walking through those double doors the very second Beatrice thinks she has won. I will make the calls, Sterling assured me. The federal agents will wait out of sight until you give the exact signal. Are you sure you are ready for this? I thought about my baby locked in a ward because of lies. I thought about church members whose life savings were stolen for luxury cars. I am completely ready, I told him. Set the trap. We are going to play by my rules, Sterling. Understood, Sterling replied. The metallic click of his keyboard ceased. But Naomi, before you walk into that church and detonate this bomb, we need to secure the package. You cannot fight a war while your daughter is locked in a hospital ward vulnerable to the system Beatrice weaponized against you. Child Protective Services opens their intake offices at 8 a.m. Beatrice filed the preliminary emergency custody request electronically last night. If CPS moves before we do, Zuri goes into state custody pending an investigation. The thought of my newborn daughter, Elijah's daughter, being handed over to strangers in the foster system made my blood run cold. Beatrice had weaponized my blackness, my grief, and the systemic biases of the medical establishment to sever my bond with my child. We stop it, I commanded. We stop it right now. I don't care who you have to wake up or how much it costs. Zuri does not leave this hospital in the hands of the state. I have already dispatched our Tier 1 private security detail, Sterling said smoothly. They arrived at the hospital 10 minutes ago. They are waiting in the underground parking structure, completely out of sight. Our senior legal counsel is with them. He has the original sealed psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Vance. The moment the hospital administration opens its doors at 6 a.m., my lawyer will present the ironclad override. Will it be enough? I asked, a tremor finally breaking through my carefully maintained composure. The attending physician was so convinced by Beatrice's performance, he wrote postpartum psychosis on my chart. Dr. Vance is the chief of psychiatry for the entire regional hospital network, Sterling reminded me. His medical authority completely supersedes a tired emergency room attending. Furthermore, our legal team will present the hospital administrators with a stark choice. Release the infant to her legally competent mother immediately, or face a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for medical malpractice, false imprisonment, and racial profiling based on fraudulent testimony. Sterling knew exactly how to play the game. Hospitals feared massive litigation more than anything else. Faced with a furious legal team, representing one of Atlanta's wealthiest estates armed with an overriding evaluation from their own top psychiatrist, the hospital risk management department would fold instantly. Once they release her, where does she go? I asked. I cannot bring her to the church. It will be a war zone. My security team will escort Zuri directly to the main family compound in Buckhead, Sterling said. Elijah's mother is waiting for her. The estate is a fortress, Naomi. We have armed guards at the gate's biometric locks on the doors and a full medical team on standby. Beatrice and Terrence could bring an army and they still wouldn't get within a mile of that child. Zuri will be perfectly safe. Relief washed over me so profound and absolute that I nearly collapsed back onto the pillows. My daughter would be safe. She would be surrounded by Elijah's family, protected by the very wealth Beatrice was trying to steal. "Call me the exact second she is in the car," I told him. "I will," Sterling promised. "Now get ready. The sun is coming up, Naomi." I hung up the burner phone and slid it back under the mattress for the final time. The digital clock on the wall read 5:45 a.m. The sky outside the window was beginning to lighten, shifting from inky black to a bruised, dull purple. I pushed the blankets back and swung my legs over the side of the hospital bed. The physical agony was immediate and breathtaking. My torn C-section incision screamed in protest, a hot, searing pain that radiated through my entire core. I gritted my teeth, gripping the metal bed rail until my knuckles turned white. I forced myself to stand. I refused to let the pain stop me. Nurse Kenya entered the room quietly, holding a small duffel bag. She took one look at my pale face and the way I was clutching my abdomen. "You should not be standing," she whispered, her brow furrowing with concern. "Naomi, you tore your internal stitches when that woman dragged you off the bed. You are bleeding. You need to stay down." "I cannot stay down, Kenya," I replied. Forcing my voice to remain steady. "I have a gala to attend." Kenya sighed, shaking her head. She knew she couldn't stop me. "I brought the clothes you requested," she said, setting the duffel bag on the rolling tray table. "Sterling's team dropped them off at the loading dock." I unzipped the bag. Inside was not a pair of loose sweatpants or a comfortable maternity dress. I was not going to walk into that church looking like a broken, defeated victim. I reached into the bag and pulled out a flawlessly tailored midnight blue Armani power suit. It was sharp-structured and projected absolute, undeniable authority. "Help me get dressed," I told Kenya. It took 20 agonizing minutes. Every movement was torture. Kenya carefully taped a fresh, thick surgical dressing over my bleeding incision, wrapping a tight compression binder around my abdomen to hold me together. I slipped into the crisp, white blouse and pulled the midnight blue blazer over my shoulders. I stepped into a pair of low, elegant heels. I walked over to the small mirror above the sink. I splashed cold water on my face, washing away the remnants of the exhausted, terrified mother Beatrice thought she had broken. I applied a sharp wing of eyeliner and a deep, bold red lipstick. I gathered my natural hair, pulling it back into a sleek, severe bun. I looked in the mirror. The vulnerable, grieving widow was gone. The dutiful, scapegoated daughter was dead. The woman staring back at me was the CEO of a financial technology firm, a woman who understood leverage power and absolute destruction. My burner phone vibrated. I answered it without looking at the screen. "The package is secure." Sterling's voice crackled through the speaker. The hospital administration folded the second our lawyers walked in. "They officially expunged the psychosis diagnosis from your chart. Zuri is in the armored SUV with the security detail. They are pulling into the family estate right now." A fierce, triumphant smile spread across my face. "Perfect." "The hospital staff is expecting you to sign formal discharge papers," Sterling added. "The attending physician is highly agitated that you are leaving against medical advice, but he cannot legally hold you." "Let him be agitated," I said, grabbing my purse. "I am leaving." I walked out of the VIP recovery suite, my heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. The pain in my abdomen was a dull, constant roar, but I ignored it. I walked past the nurse's station. The attending physician, the one who had ordered me sedated, stepped in front of me holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Anderson, you cannot leave," he stammered, looking flustered and defensive. "You suffered a severe abdominal trauma. You are risking massive internal hemorrhaging. Furthermore, the circumstances surrounding your admission." "My lawyer has handled the circumstances surrounding my admission." I interrupted, my voice cold and dismissive. "I am checking myself out against medical advice." "Print the form. I will sign it." The doctor opened his mouth to argue, but Nurse Kenya stepped up beside him, handing him the paperwork. "She is legally cleared for discharge, doctor," Kenya stated firmly. He reluctantly handed me the pen. I signed the release form with a sharp, aggressive flourish. I didn't look back as I walked toward the elevators. When the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, a massive man in a dark suit with an earpiece stepped forward. "Mrs. Anderson," he said respectfully, "I am Jackson, head of Sterling Security Detail. Your vehicle is waiting." He escorted me through the sliding glass doors of the hospital into the crisp, cool morning air. A sleek black bulletproof Cadillac Escalade idled at the curb. The tinted windows hid the interior, projecting an aura of intimidating wealth and impenetrable security. Jackson opened the heavy rear door for me. I climbed inside, sinking into the plush leather seat. The interior of the SUV was silent, isolated from the noise of the city. I looked out the tinted window as the driver pulled away from the curb, merging smoothly into the early morning Atlanta traffic. My phone buzzed. A text message from Beatrice lit up the screen. "We are at the church setting up the stage. The elders are arriving soon. Be here by 9 a.m. sharp. Don't make a scene. Just smile, sign the papers, and you can go back to the hospital. Remember what happens if you don't." I stared at the message, a cold, dark amusement filling my chest. She was so incredibly arrogant. She truly believed she held all the cards. She thought she was the puppet master pulling the strings of her broken, desperate daughter. She had no idea she was already a ghost. "Jackson," I said, leaning forward to speak through the partition. "Yes, ma'am." "Take me to Greater Hope Cathedral." Jackson nodded curtly from the front seat and steered the armored Cadillac Escalade toward the wealthy heart of Atlanta. The drive felt both instantaneous and agonizingly slow. I watched the familiar tree-lined streets roll by outside the tinted glass streets I had driven down countless times as an obedient daughter trying to earn a single sliver of maternal affection. Today, those streets were just the paved path to a ruthless battlefield. The Escalade turned smoothly onto the sprawling, immaculate campus of Greater Hope Cathedral. The massive parking lot was packed to the brim with luxury vehicles, shining under the morning sun. I could see the enormous banners draped across the front entrance, proudly advertising the highly anticipated Women of Excellence Gala. Valets in crisp uniforms were rushing frantically back and forth, eagerly opening doors for the arriving church elite. It looked less like a humble place of worship and much more like a superficial red carpet event for a fraudulent award show. Jackson pulled the SUV right up to the main entrance, aggressively bypassing the long valet line entirely. A church security guard stepped forward to object, but Jackson simply rolled down his window and flashed a private security credential that made the man immediately step back and lower his head in silent submission. I sat in the back seat for one final, deeply quiet moment. I carefully smoothed the sharp lapels of my midnight blue Armani suit. I checked my reflection in the dark-tinted window one last time. There was absolutely no fear left inside me. The intense physical pain from my recently torn surgical stitches was reduced to a dull, distant throb, completely overshadowed by the icy, pure adrenaline pumping fiercely through my veins. Jackson stepped out and opened my heavy door. I stepped out, my expensive heels clicking sharply against the pavement. The bright morning sun hit my face. It was finally time. Inside the cathedral's massive banquet hall, the scene was a grotesque, overwhelming display of stolen opulence. The cavernous room was literally dripping in fake, unearned luxury. Towering crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over dozens of round tables draped in heavy ivory linen. Massive floral centerpieces composed of imported white roses and rare orchids dominated the center of every single table. A live string quartet played softly in the far corner, desperately trying to lend an air of old money sophistication to a room funded entirely by gross financial theft. Hundreds of dedicated church members were gathered together, dressed impeccably in their absolute Sunday best, completely oblivious to the horrifying fact that their depleted retirement funds had directly paid for the imported caviar appetizers currently circling the room on silver trays. At the very center of it all was my toxic family. Jada was holding court near the front of the hall, wearing a pristine, white custom Chanel dress that I knew for a fact cost more than she had ever made in a legitimate year of work. She laughed loudly, constantly, tossing her perfectly styled hair, aggressively, flashing her diamond tennis bracelets at anyone who walked by her table. She looked exactly like a wealthy socialite playing her assigned part flawlessly. But just a few feet away from her, the carefully constructed illusion was rapidly cracking. Terence stood near the front VIP tables where the senior church elders were seated in places of high honor. He was wearing a custom-tailored velvet blazer, but his usual smooth performance was failing miserably. He was sweating profusely, beads of moisture gathering on his forehead. He kept nervously pulling at his tight collar, anxiously shifting his weight from foot to foot and obsessively checking his gold Rolex watch every 30 seconds. Every time one of the prominent elders spoke to him, Terence offered a forced, terrified smile. He knew the clock was ticking down. He knew the church elders were expecting their $40 million back this exact morning, and the immense, crushing pressure of his collapsing Ponzi scheme was physically breaking him down in real time. And then there was Beatrice. My mother was completely in her element. She moved effortlessly through the large crowd like visiting royalty, kissing cheeks and graciously accepting continuous praises. She wore a wide, benevolent, holy smile, flawlessly playing the role of the blessed matriarch of the congregation. She stopped at the main elder table, placing a manicured, heavily jeweled hand on the shoulder of Pastor Williams. She was laying the groundwork, loudly expressing her profound gratitude for the church's ongoing spiritual support during her family's difficult season of grief. She was deliberately setting the grand stage for the massive transfer of Elijah's legacy, wrapping her disgusting greed in the beautiful language of faith and philanthropy. It was a sickening, masterful performance. I stood in the dark shadows of the vestibule watching them celebrate their fake wealth for a long, silent moment. I let the deep anger harden into absolute, unbreakable resolve. I gave a quick nod to Jackson, who instantly signaled his two massive security men. They stepped forward in unison and pushed the heavy oak doors to the banquet hall wide open. The doors hit the interior walls with a resounding, violent crack that echoed loudly over the string quartet. The soft music faltered and died. Heads turned sharply. The lively conversations died, instantly replaced by a heavy, palpable silence that swept across the entire room as hundreds of eyes locked simultaneously onto the main entrance. I walked in. I did not walk like a broken, grieving widow, desperate for comfort. I did not walk like an unstable, psychotic woman fresh out of a hospital psychiatric bed. I walked with the absolute, terrifying authority of a billionaire corporate CEO who had come to collect a massive debt. My posture was rigid, my expression completely unreadable and cold. The midnight blue Armani power suit radiated sheer, undeniable power. My bold red lipstick was flawless. Every single step I took reverberated loudly through the eerily silent banquet hall. The large congregation began to whisper frantically. A low, anxious murmuring rippled through the crowded tables like a sudden wave. Beatrice had spent the last 24 hours meticulously planting the destructive seeds of a very specific narrative. She had told the prayer circles and the usher boards that I had suffered a massive, violent mental breakdown. She had painted a tragic, sympathetic picture of a hysterical, aggressive woman who needed to be heavily medicated, locked away, and kept far away from her own newborn child. But the composed, powerful woman currently walking down the center aisle defied every single vicious lie she had told. The congregation looked incredibly confused. This was not a woman who needed a psychiatric hold or a straitjacket. This was a woman who clearly owned the room. I kept my eyes locked directly on the main stage. I saw Terence freeze completely, his eyes bulging out of his head as if he had just seen a terrifying ghost. Jada gasped loudly and dropped her expensive champagne flute. It shattered loudly against the hard marble floor, but she did not even flinch, staring at me in sheer terror. They had fully expected me to arrive looking defeated, flanked by Beatrice's hired lackeys, ready to quietly sign my life and my fortune away in tears. Beatrice's holy smile vanished instantly. For a fraction of a second, genuine, unmasked panic flashed across her carefully powdered face. But she was a seasoned survivalist. She quickly plastered the fake, benevolent smile back onto her face and rushed toward the center stage, her high heels clicking frantically against the wood. She grabbed the microphone firmly from the podium, desperately determined to seize control of the public narrative before I could utter a single damaging word to the crowd. "Welcome, everyone," Beatrice announced loudly, her voice pitching up slightly, betraying her severe underlying anxiety. "Please direct your undivided attention to the center aisle. We are so incredibly blessed this beautiful morning. My strong daughter Naomi has found the strength to join us today." She gestured widely toward me, playing to the attentive crowd. "As you know, Naomi lost her wonderful husband Elijah and has been battling overwhelming grief. But the Lord is a mighty healer. Today, Naomi is here to honor Elijah's legacy. She will make a generational wealth donation to our family's philanthropic trust, managed by myself and Terrence to uplift this community." The congregation broke into polite applause. Beatrice gripped the microphone stand, her knuckles turning bone white. She looked down at me, her eyes screaming a desperate warning. "Come up here, sweetheart." Beatrice coaxed smoothly into the microphone, extending her hand in a fake show of maternal love. "Come sign the documents and let this church celebrate your generosity." I did not break eye contact for a single second. I ascended the stairs with deliberate precision. I reached out and took the microphone from her shaking hand. I pulled a small silver USB drive out of my pocket. I held the small silver USB drive up to the light, letting the congregation see it before turning my attention to the massive audiovisual podium situated just to the left of the main stage. The church had recently spent hundreds of thousands of dollars upgrading their technology, including 2 enormous state-of-the-art LED projector screens mounted on either side of the baptismal pool. Beatrice had specifically requested the screens be lowered today to display the fake philanthropic trust logo. It was a terribly convenient setup for my purposes. The sound technician, a young man who looked completely bewildered by my sudden deviation from the printed program, instinctively reached out to stop me. Jackson, my head of security, materialized out of nowhere and simply placed a massive hand on the young man's shoulder. The technician took one look at Jackson's tailored suit and the imposing bulk beneath it, and wisely took a massive step back, raising his hands in surrender. I plugged the silver USB drive directly into the primary port. The system recognized the media instantly. I tapped the touchscreen, routing the video file to both massive LED screens simultaneously. I turned back to face the sea of expectant faces in the banquet hall. Hundreds of people were staring at me, their expressions a mix of polite confusion and mounting anxiety. I raised the microphone to my lips. My voice was steady, echoing with crystal-clear precision across the cavernous room. "Before I sign a single document," I said, looking directly into the crowd, "let me show you exactly how my family defines love. Let me show you the truth behind the blessed matriarch of Greater Hope Cathedral." I pressed play. The giant LED screens flickered to life. The high-definition hospital security footage illuminated the entire hall, casting a cold, sterile glow over the expensive floral arrangements and ivory linens. Because there was no audio, the silence in the church became absolute, thick and heavy with anticipation. The congregation watched as the camera angle showed the hallway outside my VIP recovery suite. They saw the heavy wooden door slightly ajar. They saw me lying in the hospital bed, looking fragile and exhausted, clutching my newborn baby to my chest, just 24 hours after having my abdomen sliced open. Then the congregation watched Beatrice Anderson, their beloved senior deaconess, march into the frame. A collective sharp intake of breath echoed through the room as the footage played out exactly as I remembered it. They watched my mother slam the heavy leather portfolio onto my lap. They saw my physical recoil, my desperate attempt to protect Zuri. They saw Terrence moving to block the door, trapping me inside. And then the entire banquet hall erupted into a chorus of horrified gasps and muffled screams. On the massive screens, Beatrice lunged forward like a rabid animal. She grabbed a fistful of my braided hair. The congregation watched in undeniable high definition as their pious spiritual leader violently yanked a postpartum mother right off the edge of a hospital bed. They saw my body hit the hard tile floor. They saw me curl into a fetal position, clutching my torn, bleeding surgical incision in pure agony. They saw little Zuri tumble onto the blankets, They saw Jada standing in the corner, checking her fingernails, completely unfazed by the horrific violence unfolding 2 feet away from her. The reaction in the room was explosive. Women in the front row covered their mouths in sheer terror. Several church elders stood up from their VIP tables, knocking over their expensive crystal water glasses in their haste. The illusion of Beatrice Anderson, the wholly generous and loving mother, shattered into a million irreparable pieces in front of a live audience. The people who had worshipped alongside her for decades, who had entrusted her with their deepest spiritual confessions, were now watching her commit a brutal felony assault against her own flesh and blood. Beatrice's face drained of all color, turning an ashen, sickly gray. She stumbled backward, her high heels catching on the carpeted stage, nearly tripping over her own feet. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with wild, unrestrained panic. "Turn that off right now. It is a lie. That is doctored footage. It is a deep fake." Nobody believed her. The footage was too raw, too visceral, too undeniably real. The timestamps and hospital security watermarks were clearly visible in the corner of the screens. Jada snapped out of her paralyzed state. Realizing her entire luxurious lifestyle was actively burning to the ground, she hiked up her custom white Chanel dress and sprinted frantically toward the audiovisual booth. "Shut it down!" Jada screamed frantically, waving her arms at the terrified sound technician. "Unplug the main power cord. Pull the plug." She lunged for the control board, her manicured hands reaching for the main power switch. But Jackson and another massive security operative stepped smoothly into her path, forming an impenetrable human wall of solid muscle and dark suits. Jada slammed into them, bouncing off their chests like a rag doll. Jackson did not even flinch. He simply looked down at her, crossing his arms. "You need to step back, ma'am," Jackson stated, his tone completely devoid of emotion but carrying a lethal warning. "You do not have authorization to touch that equipment." "You cannot do this!" Jada shrieked, her carefully constructed socialite facade melting into pure, unadulterated desperation. "This is private family business. You are ruining everything." I kept the microphone close to my mouth, projecting my voice over her hysterical screaming. The video looped automatically, starting from the beginning. The congregation was forced to watch the brutal assault a second time. The horror in the room compounded, mutating rapidly into intense, palpable anger. "Look at her," I commanded, pointing directly at Beatrice, who was now frantically waving her arms at Pastor Williams, trying to get him to intervene. "Look at the woman who stood at the pulpit last Sunday and preached about family values. She dragged me by my hair, tore my surgical wounds open, and then threw herself on the ground to lie to the medical staff. She told the doctors I was suffering from postpartum psychosis. She used my grief over my dead husband to have me forcibly sedated. She had Child Protective Services rip my newborn daughter from my arms. All because I refused to sign my husband's $74 million trust fund over to her and Terrence." The gasps in the room grew louder, shifting into furious murmurs. The church elders were exchanging dark, severe looks. The realization was hitting them. If Beatrice was capable of this level of extreme violence and deception against her own grieving daughter, what else was she capable of hiding? Terrence was practically vibrating with terror. He was backing away slowly, trying to blend into the shadows near the side exit doors. He knew the narrative had collapsed. He knew the money he desperately needed to pay back the angry church elders was never coming. He was a trapped rat looking for an escape route. Beatrice ran to the center of the stage, tears streaming down her face. But these were not her usual, perfectly timed theatrical tears. These were tears of genuine, profound panic. Her empire of lies was crumbling into dust, and she was desperate to salvage whatever scraps of credibility she had left. "Do not listen to her," Beatrice pleaded into a secondary microphone she snatched from the podium. Her voice trembled with desperate manipulation. "The video is entirely out of context. Naomi was out of her mind. She was threatening to hurt the baby. I had to restrain her to protect my grandchild. I am a mother. I was protecting my family. You all know me. You know my heart. You know my service to this church. She is sick. She is mentally ill." I cut the video feed, replacing the horrifying assault with a bright white screen that illuminated the entire hall. The sudden shift in lighting forced everyone to focus entirely on me. I stood tall, my shoulders squared, completely unfazed by her frantic lies. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the crisp white medical affidavit. "I am not sick," I announced, my voice ringing with absolute, undeniable authority. I hold in my hand a signed, legally binding psychiatric evaluation completed at 3 o'clock this morning by Dr. Marcus Vance, the Chief of Psychiatry for the Regional Hospital Network. It officially invalidates the fraudulent diagnosis my mother manipulated the attending physician into writing. It legally proves that I am 100% sane, completely lucid, and the victim of a malicious, calculated assault. I held the document high in the air, letting the bright stage lights catch the official medical seal. The crowd murmured in shock. Beatrice's jaw dropped. The last desperate lie she had to cling to was completely destroyed. She had no more leverage. The conservatorship threat was dead. Her victim narrative was dead. "You thought you could break me," I said, turning slowly to look Beatrice directly in the eyes. "You thought you could use my grief as a weapon to silence me. You thought I was still the obedient little scapegoat you could bully into submission. You thought you could lock me away in a psychiatric ward while you paraded around Atlanta spending my husband's legacy." I took a slow, deliberate step toward her, closing the distance until we were only a few feet apart. Beatrice shrank back, her hands trembling, clutching her emerald green suit, as if it could somehow protect her from the wrath I was unleashing. "But you made one fatal miscalculation," I continued, my tone dropping into a deadly, icy calm that echoed loudly through the silent, massive cathedral hall. "I am not the frightened little girl you used to control. I am the CEO of my own company. I am the sole protector of Elijah's legacy. And I am the architect of your complete and absolute ruin." Beatrice opened her mouth, trying to formulate a defense, trying to find one last lie to save herself, but no words came out. The congregation was watching her with absolute disgust. The righteous mask had been ripped off completely. I stared her down, enjoying the sheer, unadulterated terror radiating from her eyes. "But that was just the warm-up," I stated, cutting her off before she could even try to stammer out another pathetic excuse. "Now let us talk about your retirement funds." I clicked the small black remote in my hand, advancing the presentation to the very next slide. The blinding white screen vanished instantly. In its place, a series of highly detailed, incredibly complex financial spreadsheets appeared, spanning both massive LED displays. They were offshore bank statements routed carefully through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, and wire transfer logs that Sterling and his elite team of forensic accountants had pulled directly from the dark web overnight. The documents were magnified so large that every single red negative number, every routed account, and every hidden transaction was perfectly visible to the entire congregation sitting in the opulent banquet hall. I looked directly at the VIP table where the senior church elders were seated. Their expressions shifted from profound shock to intense, desperate scrutiny as they squinted to read the massive numbers projected above them. I raised the microphone again. My voice was calm, cold, and utterly merciless. "You all thought Terrence was a brilliant financial mind," I said, my words slicing through the heavy, tense silence of the room. "You thought Apex Digital Holdings was an exclusive cryptocurrency investment firm designed to build generational wealth for the Black community. You believed him because Beatrice Anderson, your trusted senior deaconess, stood at the pulpit and personally vouched for his absolute integrity. She prayed with you, she held your hands. She convinced you to liquidate your hard-earned pensions, to empty your retirement portfolios, and to mortgage the homes you spent 40 long years paying off." I paced slowly across the stage, making sure my gaze connected with the elderly congregants sitting in the front rows. People who had worked their entire lives in factories, schools, and hospitals. People who had trusted my mother with their absolute financial security. I pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the giant glowing screens behind me. "Look closely at those routing numbers," I commanded. Apex Digital Holdings was never an investment firm. It was a textbook Ponzi scheme. Terrence never invested a single dime of your money into cryptocurrency or any legitimate market anywhere in the world. He took the deposits from the new investors to pay the fake, guaranteed 12% returns to the early investors, creating a grand, devastating illusion of massive financial success. A low, rumbling murmur began to build in the room. People were leaning forward, adjusting their glasses, staring at the irrefutable evidence of their financial ruin. The murmurs were not confused anymore. They were turning into panicked, terrified whispers. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed, displaying a highly detailed side-by-side comparison. On the left were the deposit logs from the church members. On the right were the corresponding withdrawal logs from Terrence's personal offshore accounts. "Let me show you exactly where your retirement money went," I announced. It did not go into the blockchain. It went straight to the blackjack tables. Terrence has gambling debts totaling over $12 million spread across illegal offshore sports books and high-stakes VIP rooms in Las Vegas. I clicked to the next slide, showing a barrage of receipts and wire transfers to luxury dealerships and exclusive fashion houses. And the rest of it, I continued, looking directly at Jada, who was currently shaking with absolute terror in her custom white dress. The rest of it went to fund the glamorous influencer lifestyle my sister constantly flaunts in your faces on social media. Your pensions paid for the down payment on Jada's brand new Mercedes-Benz. Your mortgaged homes paid for her first-class flights to Dubai. The very Chanel dress she is wearing right now, the one she strutted into this church with, was purchased using the college tuition funds you entrusted to her husband. I watched the realization hit the crowd like a physical shockwave. A woman in the third row, a retired school teacher who had known my family for 20 years, let out a loud, gut-wrenching wail. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "My money!" she cried out, her voice echoing agonizingly through the hall. "My husband's life insurance money. It is all gone." That single cry of despair broke the dam. The polite silence of the church gala completely disintegrated. The banquet hall erupted into absolute terrifying fury. Hundreds of people stood up simultaneously, knocking over their elegant Chiavari chairs and shattering expensive crystal centerpieces. The polite church members transformed instantly into an angry, devastated mob. People were screaming at the top of their lungs, pointing furious fingers at Terrence. An elderly man with a walking cane shoved past his table, heading straight for the front, yelling that he was going to kill the man who stole his grandchildren's inheritance. Pastor Williams jumped up from the VIP table, looking completely horrified and betrayed, grabbing his own microphone, trying to restore order, but his voice was completely drowned out by the deafening roar of the betrayed congregation. Terrence panicked. The slick, arrogant facade he had worn for 2 years melted away, leaving behind a terrified, cowardly scammer. He looked at the angry mob surging toward him and took a frantic step backward, tripping over a velvet rope. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting wildly around the room, looking for an escape route. He bolted toward the side exit located near the kitchen, pushing past terrified catering staff, dropping trays of expensive food. Beatrice realized the situation was entirely out of her control. Her golden child was ruined. Her son-in-law was fleeing. Her reputation was permanently, completely destroyed. She hitched up her emerald green designer skirt, abandoning the podium and abandoning her family, attempting to sneak down the side stairs of the stage. She was trying to slip out the back hallway to save her own skin, leaving the people she robbed to face the devastating consequences. Jackson and the elite security detail moved swiftly, forming a protective barricade around the stage to ensure the angry mob could not reach me, but they let Terrence and Beatrice run. They knew exactly what was waiting outside. Before Terrence could even reach the brass handles of the side exit doors, the piercing, deafening sound of heavy sirens bled through the thick walls of the cathedral. The wailing sound of emergency vehicles surrounded the entire building, multiplying rapidly until it sounded like a small army had descended upon the church parking lot. Red and blue lights flashed violently through the high, stained glass windows, casting erratic, aggressive shadows across the chaotic banquet hall. The massive oak double doors at the main entrance burst open with explosive force. Federal agents poured into the room like a tactical tidal wave. They were wearing dark tactical vests with bright yellow letters boldly displaying FBI and SEC across their chests. Over 50 heavily armed agents swarmed the banquet hall, moving with terrifying organized precision. Federal agents, nobody move. A booming voice commanded over a heavy megaphone, instantly silencing the screaming congregation. Remain exactly where you are. This is a federal raid. Terrence froze, his hand resting on the side exit door. He turned back, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a speeding train. Two FBI agents tackled him instantly. They hit him with such intense, brutal force that Terrence was launched backwards, slamming violently into a long catering table. The table collapsed beneath his weight, sending silver platters of imported caviar and crystal champagne flutes crashing to the floor in a massive, spectacular mess. He hit the marble floor hard, slipping on the spilled food. "Do not move!" An agent shouted, pressing a heavy knee directly into Terrence's back. The agent grabbed Terrence's arms, twisting them aggressively behind his back and snapping cold steel handcuffs around his wrists with a loud, definitive click. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." Jada began to scream hysterically. It was a high-pitched grating sound of pure entitlement crumbling under the weight of the law. She ran toward Terrence, her designer heels slipping on the wet marble, but an SEC agent intercepted her immediately. "Ma'am, step back," the female agent ordered, holding her hand up to halt Jada's frantic advance. "You are listed as a primary beneficiary of the fraudulent accounts. Everything on your person purchased with illicit funds is now subject to immediate federal asset forfeiture." Jada watched in absolute pure horror as the agent calmly reached out and confiscated her $50,000 diamond tennis bracelets, unlatching them right off her wrists. The agent then grabbed the custom white Chanel bag that Jada had been clutching like a lifeline, placing it directly into a clear plastic evidence bag. "No!" Jada shrieked, falling to her knees on the floor, sobbing over her lost luxury items, completely ignoring her handcuffed husband being dragged away by the federal agents. Beatrice had frozen on the bottom step of the stage, trapped between the furious mob of church elders and the swarm of federal agents securing the perimeter. She looked at the flashing red and blue lights reflecting through the stained glass. She looked at her golden child sobbing over a confiscated purse. She looked at her scammer son-in-law being hauled out the door facing decades in federal prison. Finally, she looked up at me standing perfectly still on the stage, watching her empire burn. Beatrice slowly turned around. Her pristine emerald suit was wrinkled. Her expensive silk scarf hung crookedly around her neck. The arrogant, cruel matriarch who had dragged me by my hair 24 hours ago was completely gone. She fell heavily to her knees on the hard floor right at the base of the stage. She looked up at me, tears of absolute panic streaming down her face, her hands clasped together in desperate, frantic prayer. "Naomi," she begged, her voice trembling with raw, pathetic terror. "Naomi, please, you have to save me. Please have mercy on your mother." I looked down at her, feeling absolutely nothing at all. The heavy sounds of the federal raid swirled around us, but standing there on the edge of the stage, I felt absolute silence. Beatrice grabbed the hem of my trousers, her fingernails digging into the fabric. Her face was a portrait of smeared mascara and desperation. "Naomi, please," she begged, her voice cracking into a wheeze. "You have to stop this. Tell them to stop. Tell them you are giving us the money. You have $74 million. You can fix this right now. You can pay them off. I am your mother, Naomi. You have to bail us out. Where will I live? What will happen to me?" I stared down at the woman who had brought me into this world. I looked at her shaking hands and her tear-stained cheeks. I thought about the pain in my abdomen, the tile of the hospital floor, and the terror of having my newborn daughter ripped away from me. I thought about the decades of emotional abuse, the constant comparisons to Jada, and the endless demands for my money and my obedience. "You want me to bail you out?" I asked, my voice echoing with a calculated calmness. "You want me to hand over the legacy Elijah built for our daughter so you can cover up a federal crime? You want me to save you after you tried to lock me in a psychiatric ward and throw my child into the foster system?" Beatrice sobbed, shaking her head back and forth. I was desperate, she cried out, her voice echoing over the sounds of federal agents outside. Terrence was in trouble. The elders were demanding their money. I did not want to hurt you, Naomi. I just needed time to figure it out. We are family. You cannot just stand there and let them take everything away from me. I am your mother. I am your... Where will I live, Naomi? Where will I go? I reached into the inner pocket of my tailored blazer. I did not pull out a checkbook. I did not pull out the trust fund transfer documents she so desperately wanted. Instead, I pulled out a legal folder bearing the seal of Sterling S. Private Equity Firm. I stepped down off the raised stage. I looked down at her kneeling on the marble floor, surrounded by the shattered remnants of her fake empire. You do not have to worry about where you are going to live, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. And you certainly do not have to worry about paying the mortgage on that beautiful estate in Buckhead anymore. Beatrice froze. The sobbing stopped, replaced by a suffocating confusion. She looked up at me, her tear-filled eyes widening with a new terror. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice trembling. I know about the identity theft, Beatrice, I stated, dropping the bomb with precision. I know exactly how you secured the mortgage for that mansion. I know you stole my social security number 5 years ago when I trusted you to help me file my business taxes. I know you forged my signature, manipulated the employment verification, and used my pristine credit score to fund your luxurious lifestyle. I know Jada's cars are in my name. I know Terrence's initial seed money came from credit lines opened under my corporate identity. I know everything. Beatrice gasped, recoiling as if I had struck her across the face. She released her grip on my trousers, her hands flying up to cover her mouth. You went through my finances, she stammered, her eyes darting around the room, as if looking for an escape route that did not exist. I did not just go through your finances, I corrected, my tone dripping with disdain. I took control of them. You thought you were so clever building your kingdom on my back. You thought you could use my name to shield yourself from the consequences of Terrence's massive crypto scam. You thought that if the feds ever came knocking, you could just point the finger at your successful, wealthy daughter and let me take the fall for your crimes. No, Naomi, please, Beatrice pleaded, crawling backward on her knees, her green suit now ruined and stained with spilled champagne. I never meant for you to get hurt. I always planned to pay it back. I just needed the credit to get started. I tossed the legal folder directly onto her lap. The thud of the documents hitting her legs sounded like a judge's gavel striking a block. I instructed my wealth manager to contact the bank that holds the mortgage on your Buckhead mansion, I explained. I did not pay off your fraudulent debt, Beatrice. I bought it. I used Elijah S. Private Equity Firm to purchase the debt portfolio outright. I own the mortgage on that house. I own the titles to Jada S. cars. I hold every single cent of your fake stolen life right here in my hands. Beatrice stared at the folder in her lap, her hands shaking as she peeled back the cover. She stared at the bold black letters printed across the top page. It was a notice of eviction and asset seizure. The loan was secured under fraudulent terms, which means it is in immediate default. I continued, my voice devoid of mercy. You do not have 30 days. You do not have a grace period. I am foreclosing today. By the time you leave this church, my security team will have changed the locks on the Buckhead estate. Your belongings will be placed on the curb. Jada's cars have already been repossessed from the parking lot outside. You have absolutely nothing left. The realization hit Beatrice like a blow. Her mouth opened in a silent scream of agony. She looked around the banquet hall, witnessing the total collapse of her world. Terrence was being dragged out the side doors in handcuffs by 2 FBI agents. Jada was sitting on the floor, surrounded by federal investigators, crying as they confiscated her jewelry and designer accessories, holding them as evidence of wire fraud. The church elders who had once treated Beatrice with reverence and respect were now glaring at her with hatred and disgust, pointing fingers in her direction as they gave their statements to the police. She had lost everything. Her status as the beloved senior deaconess of Greater Hope Cathedral was destroyed. Her stolen wealth was legally seized. Her golden child was facing federal asset forfeiture and criminal conspiracy charges. Her scammer son-in-law was heading to federal prison for decades. And her own freedom was hanging by a thin thread as an SEC agent began walking toward her holding a pair of steel handcuffs. I watched her process the magnitude of her ruin. This was the ultimate checkmate. There was no manipulation left to deploy. There was no fake church reputation to hide behind. There was no scapegoat left to blame. She was finally forced to face the catastrophic consequences of her own ruthless greed and cruelty. "You destroyed us." Beatrice sobbed, her voice weak and broken, looking up at me from the floor. "You destroyed your own family." "No," I said, my expression hardened into stone. "You destroyed yourselves. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see the rot." I turned my back on her, leaving her kneeling in the middle of the ruined banquet hall. I did not look back as the federal agent reached her, grabbing her arms and pulling them behind her back. I did not flinch when I heard the sharp click of the handcuffs securing her wrists. I did not hesitate as I walked down the center aisle, my heels echoing softly against the marble floor. Jackson and the security team flanked me, forming a tight perimeter as we moved through the crowd of angry church members and shouting federal agents. The air inside the cathedral felt heavy and suffocating, thick with the smell of spilled wine, crushed orchids, and profound despair. But as I reached the massive oak double doors at the main entrance, I felt an overwhelming sense of lightness wash over my entire body. Jackson pushed the heavy doors open for me. I stepped out of the dark, suffocating church and out into the bright morning sunlight. The crisp Atlanta air filled my lungs, carrying the sweet scent of blooming magnolia trees. The chaotic screaming of the banquet hall faded into a dull hum behind me. I stood perfectly still on the front steps, completely unfazed by the destruction I had just orchestrated. This was my justice. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. A new chapter of my life was finally beginning today, right now. I knew Elijah would be incredibly proud of me for protecting our beautiful daughter. I smiled, walking straight forward. Jackson opened the heavy armored door of the Cadillac Escalade, and I stepped inside, leaving the absolute ruins of my past behind forever. The drive back to the estate was peaceful. 6 months have passed since that explosive morning at Greater Hope Cathedral, and the dust has finally settled over the wreckage of my family's fraudulent empire. The justice system moves incredibly slowly, but when it finally strikes, it hits with absolute devastating precision. Terrence did not even attempt to fight the charges. When the federal prosecutors laid out the overwhelming mountain of forensic evidence Sterling and his team had gathered, the arrogant crypto scammer folded immediately. He took a plea deal to avoid spending the rest of his natural life behind bars. The judge showed zero mercy during the sentencing hearing, specifically citing the predatory nature of his crimes against vulnerable elderly church members. Terrence is currently serving a 15-year sentence in a maximum security federal penitentiary in Florida. There are no luxury watches or tailored velvet blazers in his cell block. As for Beatrice and Jada, their massive, devastating fall from grace was a public spectacle that the local news stations covered for weeks. Since I legally foreclosed on the Buckhead mansion and seized the luxury vehicles, they were instantly rendered homeless and destitute. The federal government froze every single bank account associated with their names during the ongoing investigation. Today, my mother and sister are living in a tiny, cramped room at a run-down roadside motel on the outskirts of the city. The glamorous influencer lifestyle Jada constantly flaunted on social media has been completely obliterated. She now spends her days riding the public bus to meetings with overwhelmed public defenders. But losing their stolen wealth was only the beginning of their absolute nightmare. The furious members of Greater Hope Cathedral did not just walk away after the raid. Supported by a legal fund I anonymously established through Elijah's private equity firm, the defrauded congregants launched a massive coordinated civil class action lawsuit against my mother. Beatrice spends every waking moment drowning in legal summons and court mandates. Furthermore, the district attorney officially indicted both of them on multiple felony counts of severe identity theft and bank fraud based on the ironclad evidence I handed over. They are currently out on minimal bail, desperately awaiting a criminal trial that will almost certainly result in mandatory state prison sentences for both of them. They have tried to reach out to me several times, sending pathetic, desperate letters begging for financial forgiveness. I throw them directly into the shredder without reading a single word. My reality is a beautiful, stark contrast to their misery. I am sitting right now on the expansive, sunlit balcony of Elijah's heavily guarded family estate in Atlanta. A gentle, warm southern breeze is rustling through the massive oak trees that line the pristine property. Resting securely against my chest is my beautiful, healthy daughter Zuri. She is 6 months old today, cooing softly as she reaches her tiny hands up to grab a lock of my natural hair. Her bright brown eyes are the exact same shape and color as her father's. Every single time I look down at her smiling face, I feel an overwhelming, profound sense of peace. I fought a brutal, terrifying war to protect this innocent child from the monster who raised me, and looking at her now, I know every single second of that agonizing battle was entirely worth it. Elijah's monumental $74 million legacy remains completely untouched by the greedy, desperate hands that tried to steal it. It sits securely in an ironclad generation's skipping trust that Sterling manages with absolute flawless precision, ensuring Zuri will have every opportunity and advantage her father dreamed of giving her. My own financial technology business is absolutely booming. I took the intense focus and sharp strategic anger I used to dismantle my mother's fraudulent empire and channeled it directly into my work. We just closed a massive Series B funding round that doubled our corporate valuation, and I am currently expanding our operations into 3 new international markets. I do not just feel like a successful chief executive officer anymore. I feel like an untouchable force of nature. I lean back against the comfortable plush cushions of the patio chair, pulling Zuri just a little bit closer to my heart as I watch the golden sunset paint the Atlanta sky. The painful, devastating scars from my emergency surgery have fully healed, leaving behind a fierce reminder of my absolute survival. The deep emotional wounds inflicted by decades of toxic familial abuse have also scarred over completely. For 34 years, I desperately believed the dangerous lie that I was obligated to tolerate extreme disrespect, manipulation, and outright abuse simply because the perpetrators shared my bloodline. I was conditioned to believe that setting firm boundaries made me a bad daughter. But going through the absolute darkest, terrifying valley of my life taught me the most valuable, crucial lesson I will ever learn. Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family. Never set yourself on fire to keep toxic people warm. You owe absolutely nothing to the individuals who view your immense success as a personal bank account and treat your profound grief as a convenient business opportunity. Protecting your peace, your mental health, and your hard-earned legacy is not an act of selfishness. It is the ultimate necessary act of pure self-preservation. You have every right to walk away from the people who constantly tear you down. Now I want to pass the question over to you. How would you have handled this terrifying, intense situation if your own mother had orchestrated a massive betrayal during the most vulnerable moment of your life? Would you have dropped the hammer the exact same way I did, or would you have played the game differently? Let me know your detailed thoughts in the comments section below. Please subscribe.